So today I'm going to talk about something that's guided my thinking and design for about 20 years, and it's a little bit of a take on something that you might know but from a different angle. So I'm going to talk about authentic intersections, and it might sound like a strange kind of concept, but hopefully it'll become clear as we go through. So one phrase I saw quite a few years ago is life happens at intersections. And you know, as designers, we spend a heck of a lot of time at intersections, but a lot of people fly through intersections. That's not my street, by the way. I wish it was. But the other thing is damage also happens at intersections. You know, accidents, loss, hurt, and unintended consequence is something that happens at intersections. Sometimes it's between individuals, and sometimes it's between populations. So this slide, or this photo, I took 2 years ago. That's Kater, who used to be at ThinkTalks, and Thomas O'Rourke, or chairman of the Yurok tribe in Northern California, and that's upriver, about 2.5 hours up a gravel road up on the reservation, and you'll see that there's two rivers there, the Trinity and the Klamath River, coming together. And I was running a strategic kind of session, and you can't see it, but on one side of the river there's a rock and there's a whirlpool that's whirling around. And so Anna O'Reilly would know this slide because she actually created this. So when we came to the session, it became a bit of a theme that there's an intersection that had happened post-contact, you can see, and then after contact, there's a time of destruction. And you'll see in the middle, that's the Yurok symbol, but there's a time of destruction for their people, their river, their forest, their culture, their language, their being in reality. So just hold that as we go through, but that was an intersection. This one, I didn't see Nina in the room, but Nina, Terry and I were in the fantastic Singapore about 2.5 years ago, working with Erin and Debbie and I think Calvin might have been there, but we were looking at Pongal North, and when we were out there, these are actually from an island in Singapore, but when we were there, there's just signs everywhere. No flying objects, beware the branch will fall on you, don't fish here, different things. So sometimes we take a lot of control at intersections where people come together. Another one in the New Zealand context is, and sometimes we treat intersections all the same. I'm not going to read all this out, but this is in New Zealand, like other countries in the world, or some anyway, smoking is going down. It's the single leading cause of preventable death in New Zealand, and even though it's going down, with the Māori population, it's not. And especially young Māori women, wahine, it's not going down. So we celebrate that it's going down across the population, but in reality it's not everywhere. And this is Mundy's phrase, but it's like Einstein. You know, governments around the world have structured efforts to curb smoking with the idea that they'll use methods that are international best practice, and the logic that has worked with one group will work with all groups. So that was definitely happening in New Zealand. So again, hold that thought. So now just switching, so something I thought of years ago, I read a book and it talked about authentic intersections. And I also attended something with John Boddy and David Island and I, and a guy called Jamer Hunt was speaking from the Parsons New School of Design. There was just about 20 of us over in Italy. And Jamer was talking about, Jamer runs a transdisciplinary design. And he's talking about, he had a photo of an intersection. And I'm not sure if this was the one, but it's as powerful. So this is an intersection in Poynton in Cheshire in the UK. 26,000 vehicles go through it, lots of trucks, lots of buses, and it's heavily controlled. Back to that control, lots of traffic signals, lots of signs, lots of markings. And part of it looks something like that. The street designer, I was looking at his YouTube clip, and he was saying that, this is merely a traffic-controlled, signalled wasteland. It effectively cut one side of the village off from the other side, right? That was this space, if you like. So it was a shared space, but it was a highly controlled shared space that was working for some, but not for others. So if you think about that shared space, intersections being shared space, what if we took all the signs and traffic lights away and gave back some control? Now it looks something like that. So you'll see in that picture compared to the last one, there isn't any traffic lights, you can't see any signs, it's been redesigned into a shared space. And if you are ever interested in this particular example, you can go online and there's a couple of short YouTube clips that the street designer did, and he just walks across all that intersection and cars and trucks are just stopping for him. A child walks across and people stop. So what is that about? So again, it's a different concept of a shared space, and I like the idea that it's a shift in thinking. It's away from highly regulated spaces, if you like, to using the natural skills that humans are blessed with, as he says, to negotiate movement. So all those signs have gone that directed people what to do and controlled things, if you like, and in its place, I think, human beings are engaged in the humanity in the moment. So people are drawing on their being, the way they act with others, and they're actually drawn into a different space with everyone else in that intersection, and they have to be way more conscious. They have to decide. They don't switch off, and etc. So you're highly conscious. So if you think about that shared space, that's quite a switch. So if we go back to some of these examples, what's missing? One of the things is mutually designed intersections for mutual value. If you think about that Poynton example, pedestrians, trucks, traffic, etc. moving through that space, there's mutual value there, and there's trust and respect that's now in that space. And now if you think about the work that we do, often we work with government, and there's a lot of policies and services that come from a policy person's point of view. So people well intended, but they're standing in my point of view, their point of view. We bring in those other perspectives, and then we bring in mutually relevant facts, and all of a sudden you've got an intersection that can be meaningful and that can be valuable for people. And it's one of the things that we do all the time. And when you do that, if you think about intersections in this way, what they are is an unforced area of mutual interest. A point where valuable collaboration happens, which we can build on, a search for themes, patterns and hidden connections. What they're not is convincing others to think what I think, attacking flaws in the other person's position, manipulating the others to get what I want. So again, if you kind of think about the work we do, the spaces we create, be it an initiative that happens over time, be it a design session, anything else, we're actually creating authentic intersections. So every day we're designing them, And, we're designing intersections that address power imbalances, give voice to the voiceless. In this room that I'm standing in now, we had, ministers and people from industry and government 2 days ago, and we're giving them fresh eyes, fresh ears, and that was happening. Surface humanity, improve experiences, make the system and the patterns more visible. So we just do that all the time. And so, it's really a bit of a reframe of co-design, but it's something that's guided me for 15 or 20 years. That co-design is, is the art of creating meaningful, authentic intersections that are sustainable. It's what we do. And if you look at our tools, a lot of them are about intersecting. The 4 voices, the intent statements, Doblin's viability, desirability, possibility. It's all about intersects. And if you look at some of the other tools, it's all about creating meaning and the right dynamic and holding that space at the intersection. And back to the smoking, the work we did in New Zealand with young Māori women that Mundi led here, and this is what you're seeing is Gretchen's fantastic graphics up on the screen. But, the work we did was, there was always focus in this space, and there's a whole lot of money going into this space, but that population and those voices were never really intersecting with all of that funding and all of that effort. They were just kind of going through time, and they weren't really having a voice and an influence. So when we did that work, the result of it, 54, I think, women took part over time, a whole lot of providers, and we understood what they were doing, like ThinkTalks does, their lives, prototyped some things with them, tested them out, and then we had a formal external evaluation of it all. And I purposely put this in small font. The interesting thing is, a lot of those young women stopped smoking or reduced smoking, but what you're seeing in that small font on the screen is a couple of them who were homeless got homes. Some of their kids who wouldn't hug them or kiss them, hugged them and kissed them. They had more self-belief. Some of them stopped taking antidepressants. The ripples of that work were huge, and it's what we do in ThinkTalks. But their point of view, if we hadn't created that shared safe space to intersect, it would never have made a difference. And again, back to the Europe people. This is a sketch I did, which Anna Riley turned into that neat graphic. But if you look at this, it enabled us to say, well, there was this intersection in time when back in the 1500s, and then later on about the 1800s. So there was this intersection in time, and it was a time of destruction, and it enabled us to have a conversation where I thought they were kind of on the up curve, but they said actually they're slowing down decline. And now it's, you'll see over stopping the decline, and the strategy is all about a time of restoration, and it's all around returning to balance. So what happened at that intersection is they got out of balance, and balance is incredibly important to the Yurok tribe and a lot of First Nations. So it enabled us to think about that intersection and coming through it and past it in a different way. And the only other thing I was going to say about that, I had this thought that really that intersection could be a blip in time if they return to balance. They've been on the land for thousands of years. They could be on their land for thousands more in a way that's more self-determined, and they've got more control, so they can actually come out of that whirlpool and cycle. So, authentic intersections, equal shared spaces that create mutual value, and better futures happen at authentic intersections, whether it's ease, health, equity, intended consequences, and we at ThinkPlace have the privilege to shape these futures every day.